Well, hi everyone. Aaron here for another Unapologetics show. I'm glad you are with me, and I hope you stick it through to the end where I'll have some citations of some of today's source material. But welcome to today on this beautiful June 21st. Happy Father's Day. Now, since it is Father's Day, I thought it would be interesting for us to talk about men and church unapologetically. So I may offend some people, I may not offend some people, but please understand that I'm just painting with large strokes, and of course large strokes don't apply to everyone. Large strokes don't apply to in particulars. These are just generalizations, and there's always exceptions to every rule, and I realize that. But these are just some generalizations, and I'm talking about why do men hate church? Why do men hate going to church? Why do men hate going to church? I've got 5 reasons and then some solutions to this that we're going to talk about at the end. So, number 1, right away here, why do men hate going to church? Is that the church is perfectly designed to speak to women. It is not so perfectly designed to speak to men. The church is perfectly designed to speak to women. And so therefore, women more often than not find church more interesting, more often than not, than men do. I mean, think about the number of men you would see in a typical Sunday morning worship hour. Mostly women. Men are always in the minority, rather than reflecting, say, the surrounding culture of 50-50 nearby. It's always more women than men. And why do men hate going to church? Well, because it's not designed for them. Because if you think about it, the perfect church person is nurturing, loving and supportive and caring, soft and gentle, and all of these things, dependent on others. And while some men do not excel in these traits. They're just not good at them. They're not good at them. So if that's the perfect churchgoer and you're not good at it, you don't like to go. Therefore, the church is not designed for men. So in a church, to be really, really successful, you need to be really highly verbal, right? Highly verbal, a lot of communication style. You need to be very sensitive and very relational. If you are not these things, you kind of aren't so good at it, right? So if these things are the more perfect churchgoer, and many men are not these highly verbal, sensitive, and relational, then you may not like going. I mean, it's not that men hate Jesus or men hate the church or anything. They just don't like this system that isn't designed for them. To give you a really quick example, my wife writes for the Rochester Moms webpage. Awesome, good for her. She's great at it. The women in town love it. The moms love it. Not a mom. It's not made for me. So I don't frequent that web page. The same way for church. If you don't feel that something is made for you as a man, if you're not good at being a part of what it's made for, you're not going to go and you're not going to like it. So number 1, church isn't made for men, and to be a good church person, you need traits that many men just don't have. So that's number 1. It's not made for men in that way. Number 2, men hate going to church because they think, and often our churches, we see Jesus as wimpy Jesus. Okay? Wimpy Jesus, a God, no self-respecting man would want to emulate. Many men pride themselves on their strength, right? And I don't just mean like physical strength, beating your chest, okay? Many men pride themselves on their strength of character, their strength of conviction, their strength of emotion, and physical strength. Now, compare that to that widely held picture of Jesus. Just quick, picture Jesus in your mind. A painting, what does he look like? Does he look like a strong man that you would want to get to know? Or perhaps does he look like some white, long-haired hippie from the 70s with sunken cheeks? Right? Thin skin and bones. And so we think that of Jesus, and many men don't have that match with Christianity. They pride themselves on their strength. The God that is promoted is wimpy. Wimpy Jesus. So, if you think about it, quick, tell me one thing that Jesus is really famous for. Disciples and non-disciples, believers and atheists alike will say, oh yeah, Jesus said, turn the other cheek. Right? When you get hit, turn the other cheek. And I heard a misquotation of Jesus the other day on YouTube, and do not resist evil. So here we have wimpy Jesus who tells people when somebody hits you, just turn the other cheek. How many men do you know are going to follow that advice? How many men do you know who consider themselves strong men will tell themselves, I'm going to turn the other cheek, or tell their sons to turn the other cheek, or even their daughters? Now, wimpy Jesus is a reason men hate going to church, because they don't see him as someone they'd even like to know. And so we're going to talk more about this in the solutions section. But I'm going to tell you what, Jesus isn't wimpy. But number 2 reason why men hate going to church, we see Jesus as a pansy. Okay? Reason number 3 is because men hate going to church because they see it as ineffective. Okay? Many men like to do stuff. They like to accomplish things. They like to build stuff. They like to do stuff. They like to innovate. Now, I'm not saying women don't like to do this, okay? I'm not bashing women in any way. I'm just talking about what men are. And so these highly effective, highly driven men don't like to sit around and talk about their feelings. They don't like to sit around and say how it makes them feel. They would rather, it's just not how they're wired. Not how I'm wired. We would rather go out and do something. And so if we have a church that focuses only on Sunday morning introspection, if we have a church that focuses only on me and Jesus and interior quietness, I am not going to enjoy that, and I'm going to hate going. Right? It's fine for those who, many men would say, well, it's fine for those people who do that. And there's lots of men who enjoy that. But there's lots of men who don't. And the men that don't are a good number, and that's why they hate coming to church, going to church, whatever you want to say. Many high achieving men have left the church because they see it as poorly managed. All they do is talk there. They never accomplish anything. It's unproductive, poorly managed. The movers and the shakers have moved on to move and to shake. These men have moved on because they want to be a part of something else, because they don't feel that the church offers them this challenge, this big thing to go and do. They just want to sit and talk. Decisions are, let me just say men hate piggybacking, men hate going to church because many churches are modeled in a rather female style of decision making. Complete consensus. No one's feelings are supposed to get hurt. You're supposed to talk about everything for a very long time. There's layer upon layer of structure and checks and balances. And anyone who may be like a strong go-getter leader in this male style can be, not always, can be seen as a power-hungry bully, for instance. And so in that way, men feel the church is not built for them, not made for them, not achieving enough for them, not challenging enough for them, and so they eject and go somewhere else. Number 4, men hate going to church because, frankly, they see it as feminine and womanly. That's one reason a lot of brothers in Christ may be ashamed to share with other men that they even go to church, because they see it as a feminine thing. It's not that they're ashamed of Christ. It's not they're ashamed of any of that. It's a shame that they are perhaps ashamed of being considered womanly. Okay, now here again, there's men that don't mind this, and there's women who may, I mean, you know what I mean? There's a lot. I'm painting with broad strokes, so stick with me here. Men carry this image of themselves about manhood, about strength. Some men like to show their strength through physical things, going to the gym or being able to work in this and that. Some men pride themselves on winning awards in this and that field. Some men show their worth and their value by providing for their family or sleeping with lots of women or other things like that. But men don't find manliness by going to a church and sharing their feelings. Some men do. Many men don't. And they may see it being gentle and dependent upon others as more of a feminine thing. Like going, do you know of any men who brag about going to baby showers? No, because they see it as a womanly thing, and they don't. And if your idea of manhood is wrapped up in this culture of manhood where we get together and be men together and have this idea of manhood, we don't want to ruin that image and do something more feminine, okay? All of this manhood helps men be men, right? For time immemorial, men have been the ones asked to sacrifice for their country, for their families, right? Well, I have 97.6% of all war deaths in this country are men. Almost 98% of all war deaths, soldiers, are men. Men are 10 times more likely to die in a work accident than women. And to be this kind of macho, heroic, sacrificing guy, we build one another up with our men culture. And to be honest, church often does not promote manhood for us. It can for some it doesn't. I'll keep saying that. For some it can, for some it doesn't. Now, just for some other pieces here that we can think about, and to piggyback on what I just said, church is skewed feminine. Church is skewed for women. Think about the buildings that you know. Think about the church buildings that you have been in, or maybe that you go to every week. Think about the church pre-pandemic. Think about the church building. What color are the walls? Carpet? Who decorates these? Are there quilts hanging on the wall? Are there flowers, fresh cut flowers? Think about the decorations. Are they made to appeal to men? No, they're not. So this fifth reason is that men hate going to church because it's skewed feminine. And men notice these things. Think about the songs we sing in church. They're beautiful songs, and I love many of them. But are they meant to appeal to men? Are they action-oriented? Are they get it done? Are they sacrifice songs? More often than not, no. More often than not, the songs we sing are Jesus, lover of my soul. I come to the garden alone, where he walks with me and talks with me and tells me I'm his own. Beautiful songs, beautiful lyrics, but not appealing to many men. Okay? Another couple of things is, how many men do you know like to be lost or be considered lost, stopping at gas stations before we had cell phones, right? That was always the thing. Many men wouldn't stop and ask. Men don't like to be told that they're lost. And in many of our evangelical churches, men are told that they're lost and need to be saved. And many men don't like to hear that. May be true, but they still don't like to hear it. Rather than being asked to be action-oriented and to help change the world, they're asked to be saved and have a personal relationship with Jesus. Can you imagine men going to after work and having a personal relationship with their buddy? See, we just don't operate like that. Another thing that's skewed feminine is men's greatest fear is, many men's greatest fear is to be, to lose their control, loss of control. And when they come to church, like me as a pastor, sometimes we say, give control of your life to Jesus. And that ding, ding, ding sets off warning bells. Now, you know what? I'd rather not do that. And so it's easy to say, hard to do for men. So this message of personal relationship, giving control of your life to Jesus, doesn't quite jive with many men, and so men hate church in those ways. So let me recap here. Number one, men hate going to church because it's perfectly designed to speak to women, not so much men. Number two, men hate going to church because they think the church believes in a wimpy Jesus. Number three, men hate going to church because they see it as ineffective and poorly run. Number four, men hate going to church because they see it as womanly behavior and the opposite of the risk-taking, dangerous image they want to project. And number five, the church is, in many smaller, minor points, skewed feminine. So what are we going to do about all of this, right? Now, this is a hard thing. This is something that, like, I as a pastor, I've really been thinking about this week. Really, and it makes sense to me. I'm like, man, you know what? There aren't a lot of guys in church. And the guys that are good at church are guys that are verbal and relational and are good at emotions. Those really macho, burly guys, you don't see many of them in church, do you? I've been thinking about this a lot. I looked around our building there at Homestead. The walls are light purple. There are quilts on the walls. The songs we sing are Jesus, lover of my soul. We take a long time to get things done. So I've really been thinking about this, and I've really been wondering how can we relate more to men at Homestead Church. And I've got some ideas. The first thing, there's no quick fix, and this doesn't apply to everybody. This is just some ideas to think about. So the first thing is we need to get a correct view of Jesus. We need to get a correct view of Jesus. Jesus wasn't pasty white hippie dude from the 70s with sunken cheeks. Jesus was a carpenter, worked with his hands. He was a working man. Jesus, people back then were tough as nails. No doctors, no health care. You had to make it if you were going to eat it. You know, see what I mean? These weren't like people. Okay, well, what about the turn the other cheek, Aaron? Now, I've said this a couple of times. I said it last week, but I'll tell you again. In that culture, you couldn't use your left hand. In Jesus' culture, you couldn't use your left hand because you wiped your butt with it. And so you put that away. Now, when you can only use your right hand to eat, to talk, to shake, to greet. You never used your left because it was an insult. So, Jesus says when someone strikes you on the right cheek, that means you're going to have to backhand them. And backhanding, if any man has been backhanded, you know it's an insult. It's an insult. Boom! You're lower than me. Jesus said, turn the other cheek. And so for this to happen, that man's going to have to double up and hit you. And in that culture, that shows, and in our culture today, that shows that you're going to have to fight me. So when Jesus was saying, turn the other cheek, he wasn't saying be wimpy. He was saying be so strong that you look them in the eye and you say, you're not going to shame me. I'm strong and I'm going to look you in the eye and you're going to have to hit me and you're going to have to put me down. You'll notice Jesus is resisting without getting violent. Jesus wasn't wimpy at all. And that piece where I mentioned earlier, where I heard a speaker say, oh, Jesus said don't resist evil. That's a total mistranslation of the Greek. It's don't resist evil with evil. And so when you see evil, do not, and it's more violence, do not resist evil with violence, but resist in ways that are creative and yet strong, like turning the other cheek. Do not resist evil with violence. Jesus, do you know how strong it is to not be violent? To forgive 70 times 7? To not hold grudges? Jesus is nothing but strong. Wimpy Jesus, cast that far, far from your mind. The Jesus we follow, he said what? Come and have a personal relationship with me. And I use a little sarcasm there. Come have a person. No, he said pick up your cross and follow me. So male out there who may think that Jesus is a pansy, he's not calling you to personal relationship. He's calling you to pick up a cross of self-sacrifice. You may be used to that with your family, with your society. You may be in a job that calls for great sacrifice. I don't know. But Jesus calls us into the kingdom to pick up our sacrifice, not to be introspective. You never read Jesus saying, be introspective. You hear him say, come and follow me, because he was on a mission to defeat evil in the world. So Jesus, once you understand him, you and I, we can follow this Jesus as men. We can see that Jesus was about changing the world, doing things that were radical, risky, and ultimately dangerous. He gave up his life for it because it takes that to change things. You want to follow Jesus, it's not for the light of heart, the faint of heart, I guess I should say. Following Jesus is for those who are strong enough to stand up under the weight of that cross day after day after day, to not stoop to evil, to harming other people, and to yet war against evil day after day after day. War against injustice, oppression, and harm day after day, decade after decade. That's the Jesus we follow. We also need to focus more on a church model that focuses on the strengths of men. Risk-taking, action-oriented, go out and change the world. We need to stop talking so much and sharing our feelings and just start doing, don't we? We need to streamline our structures that make it more men-friendly. We need to make it more friendly to men. Many people think the church is a male-dominated patriarchy. I can tell you the truth. One researcher, it was funny, in a paper I read about, said that, and now get this, he said that the church is basically a women's club with a few male officers, pastors. So we need to really think about how men might fit into a church and work and be in the church. Think about all of the things that are done in a church. And where do you see men working most? Driving the bus, being ushers, greeters. But women do most of the other work. And so we need to find a way to open this up for men to feel welcomed and involved in all of this, that allows for their leadership style, that allows for them. Now, I'm not saying that this casts aside women. I'm not saying that this pushes out women. I'm not saying that women aren't important. I'm saying that we need both sides of this, both and, okay? Both men and women, both male and female, all right? We need, and we also need to bring out the more of the tough love Jesus, right? Now, we've got a lot of the kind, soft Jesus, and that's great. The Jesus who is all about inclusion and welcoming and loving and grace upon grace. That's awesome. But let me tell you about the Jesus, we need to talk about Jesus who's more like your coach, more like your drill sergeant, who will yell at you to get the very best out of you. Have you ever heard a sermon about that Jesus? That Jesus that will get every ounce of effort out of you. We need to talk more about that Jesus who wants to push men past the limits of what they think is capable. We need to talk about a Jesus who is a little more harsh in getting the most out of us and pushing us into the world, into changing things. We need to talk about this Jesus. We need that soft, loving Jesus, but we need that other balancing side of that more coach, drill sergeant, harsh Jesus to get things done. And we need to make our physical spaces more appealing to men. Less pastels, more neutral, perhaps. I think that might work too. So here, let me end this up today by saying that we know God created men and women in God's image. God has male and female all inside of God. God, in the Bible, there is male imagery and female imagery. We know that both male and female are important. We know that both are needed. What I'm talking about today is, why do men hate church? Why do many men hate church? Many men don't? Great. Why do many men hate church? Well, for the reasons I've talked about today. And I hope that this has helped you, and it's helped me get some clarity about what I would like to see happen with the men in our church and the men here in Rochester. And so perhaps we can go about this a little more inclusively. So thanks for joining in today. I'll leave your ideas and comments down below, and I'll see you next time. Thanks. Okay, so we've talked about several reasons why men hate going to church. You may agree with some of them, you may not. That's all right. This is for conversation. I'd like to point out a book, Why Men Hate Going to Church, by David Murrow. A lot of ideas we talked about today came out of here. You can find more in there. And then here's the challenge for guys for this coming week or this coming month. Number one, take responsibility for yourself. Stop being selfish. Stop being self-centered. Take responsibility for the change in your own life. Take responsibility for the choices you've made, the choices I've made. Let's take responsibility for cleaning our act up. Take responsibility. That's what our Christian faith is all about. Pick up that cross. Follow Jesus in the way that He leads us. Okay? This isn't just mamby-pamby sitting around twiddling your thumbs. Take responsibility for yourself. Number two, take responsibility for some unnecessary suffering in the world. I don't care if it's little or I don't care if it's big. Take responsibility for something. Take responsibility for yourself. Take responsibility for something big. In our world, in our United States right now, there is the call for justice for black and brown people. That's great to pick that up. There's all kinds of equality issues, healthcare issues, environmental issues, everything, anything that we would want to find. But pick up responsibility for something and make it better in Christ's name. And that gives us purpose and meaning and not just introspection. So that's what I have to say. These are several reasons why men hate going to church, and here's what we can do about it. I'll see you next time.